Hi everyone. I have a few questions that I'm going to answer in this quick Q&A. So I don't know the questions in advance, but I will answer them to the best of my ability. All right, let's begin.
Why don't you believe people really don't take their religion seriously?
Why don't I believe that people take their religion seriously? Was that the question?
Yes.
The reason is because people genuinely don't live their values. If we truly lived in this Christian nation, or we truly lived in a world where people live by their values, people would live by the exact letter and spirit of the law. They wouldn't be trying to get around certain rules. You wouldn't see issues where you have a woman with a cross tattooed with 5 kids from separate fathers, or you wouldn't have an issue where this guy claims to be Christian yet kills other people, masturbates, and watches porn, marries a stripper, has sex with multiple strippers and stuff like that. You wouldn't have the case where people aren't living by their values. And obviously no one's perfect, but at least there has to be some semblance of people living by their values in order for it to be valid. You see this in multiple cultures around the world. For example, can you truly be a good Muslim and eat bacon all the time without being not Muslim? So if you have in a country with Sharia law, you'd be punished for that. In Christian countries, there is no equivalent because there is a rise of secularism, which is where the state has been separated from the church to the level where laws of the religious law isn't enforced. So that's my main argument.
Don't you think nobody can really live according to their values?
Living according to your values is definitely possible, but there's degrees of fidelity to your living in values and a degree of obedience that makes it minimally required, that makes the threshold that you live by your values. For example, if you're a Muslim, you would follow the 5 pillars of Islam. If you were Jewish, you would follow the Torah and religious law. If you were a Christian, you would follow all the attitudes, all the dictates that were the teachings of Jesus Christ. Now, you can say there are people who live by their values in Muslim nations because they genuinely had that sense of law and obedience to the Sharia. You can say that Zionist Jews specifically live by their values because they're living for the state of Israel. But can you say Christians? Well, if there was Christian values, they would live under Christian law in Christian countries, and that is not the case.
Do you take your beliefs seriously?
Yes, I take my beliefs very seriously, which causes a lot of conflict in my life. I'm not a good believer in God in all cases. I may not follow the Abrahamic tradition that God is, how do I say it? That God is not necessarily arbitrary in who he favors, but I do try to live by my values, and I do try to live in accordance to the teachings that have been taught to me by my church, my group of people, and my ideology. But it's very hard because my religious law isn't the law of the land. So it makes it very hard for it to follow. You have to be hardcore to follow.
Do you think if you were Chinese, would you still be Catholic?
That's a good question. Would I be still Catholic? Statistically, no, but if I had the same personality, yes, I would be drawn to the Catholic faith.
Why do you think your religion is real? And how do you know it's not a man made concept?
Why do I think my religion is real and it's not a man made concept? Well, you'd have to go in. This is so what convinces me won't convince everyone. But I was already raised in a Christian context. So I had a fundamental attitude towards belief in God and belief in the teachings of Jesus. And I truly believe that the Catholic faith has the fullness of the teachings of Jesus. Now, but what would it take to convince the average person? Well, you would first need to convince them of God. You would need to first convince them that Jesus is the Son of God and did all the things he did. But it takes different things to convince different people, and if you weren't raised in if you weren't raised in a background that was Christianity, first you would have to convince them that people need saving. People need their souls to be saved.
What tangible proof do you have that your religion is the right one,
Okay, without using the Bible?
or what you feel?
Well, that's kind of hard because are you talking about things that are referenced in the Bible that
Are you seeing?
do I include things that aren't referenced in the Bible but are referenced in the historical record? Do I include visions and apparitions of God to individual humans? What is your standard for evidence? So,
Anything,
no,
but
no,
without
no. I
using
know,
the
I know,
Bible
I know. Let me finish.
for your kid.
What? So your standards for evidence is going to be wildly different, and based off of your standards for evidence, you're going to get very
It's not
different
about me,
results.
it's about you.
For example, if you need peer reviewed studies in order to believe something, you're not going to believe in half of history because there's no peer reviewed studies that are in depth, and the evidence is so that far deep or far removed that standards for evidence that are in place now don't exist from the past. The historical record is undergoing a continuous rewrite because not only because our standards for truth changed, but because our very definition of what is real changes. For example, there's this idea that is evidence of absence, which is not the case. For example, we have so many things in the historical record and the geological record that we don't have many references for. We don't even know if we don't even know when exactly when the last of the diverging human species died out. We don't know exactly when because we only have evidence of skeletons or preserved remains during a certain point. So, standards of evidence is going to be impossible. And if you want for something concrete, your record of the truth is going to be very spotty because we do not have because there's a difference between truth and evidence. So in order to convince you of my beliefs, I have to convince you of the entire historical record. I can't even reference the Bible, obviously, even though it's a text that has both historical and religious context that explains and is self-referential. So it's kind of hard to answer that question.
That's all I have. Do you
Thank you.
have something to say?
Be a free agent. Think for yourself. But we stand on the shoulders. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and we need to understand that reality is fundamentally based off of our own mental models. So if you don't understand reality, or if you don't understand the truth, you need to figure out and accept, not just accept any narrative, but figure out the real narrative and figure out what is the real truth of the matter. Thank you.